Hello and welcome to Sage Intacct Planning Academy for the financial services industry. We're going to give people another minute or two to log on in, so please hang tight and we'll get started momentarily. Thank you. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining here today. My name is Sal Catalano. I'm with Sage and a senior solutions consultant with Sage Intacct Planning. So today we are going to talk a little bit about Sage Intacct Planning, give you a little bit of an overview, talk about financial planning and analysis. We'll go through a live demo and then some questions and some next steps. I do have some colleagues who will be answering questions. So if you have questions throughout this webinar, please go ahead and put them in the chat and we will get to them as we are able. And if we don't get to them today, we will go ahead and respond to you directly. Okay, this webinar will also be available on HighSpot. Okay, all right, so welcome. So again, today I'm going to start out by giving you a little bit of an overview and talk about financial planning and analysis, and which are the tools that will take the budgeting and planning to the next level. Okay, my motto has always been: if we live, we plan. With Sage Intacct Planning, you have a tool that'll help you get started quickly. So what is Sage Intacct Planning? Well, Sage Intacct Planning is a cloud-based planning solution that eliminates the reliance on uncontrolled, inflexible, unsecure spreadsheets and replaces them with a real-time single source of truth for agile and confident decision-making. A lot of our customers are using this to streamline their annual planning process and complement that with monthly forecasting, have access to what-if scenarios at their fingertips, create driver-based plans with details that can go down to the employee level. And then they can get access to the reporting and analysis, all while being connected to the Sage Intacct core financials. Our core features revolve around being able to save you a lot of time, to be agile and allow you to move quickly and make changes as your company grows, or simply respond to any market changes. For example, as a healthcare organization, you may want to provide a new service. Imagine how easy it would be to create a scenario that includes revenues for that new service. Or if you're in the financial services industry and you want to look at some loan information or anything from that perspective, you can easily create a scenario that will allow you to make those changes and see how those changes affect your overall budget. So if there's a risk of losing revenue, you can see that. You can create a worst case scenario. You can create a best case scenario to see how those changes will affect your overall budget. Another core feature is that you can always trust the numbers. You can feel confident that numbers are rolling up correctly without having to worry about whether or not there are any mistakes in the formula of your Excel document. In my prior professional life, I spent over a decade in the finance department of various industries. I must admit that I sometimes used to spend more time footing and checking my formulas than I did creating budgets. It happened only once where my formulas became corrupted because I shared the budget with another department head, and he inadvertently changed something that threw off all my calculations. It was a nightmare. I think most of you can relate to how we guard our Excel spreadsheets. My favorite feature is to be able to collaborate in real time with directors, department heads, and other budget stakeholders. Imagine having the right people access Sage Intacct Planning, make changes, provide supporting details, roll up those numbers to the appropriate categories, then take those numbers and bring them back into the general ledger for budget to actual analysis. I remember my finance team used to spend a couple of hours a week communicating with department heads and managers to provide them with budget to actual balances when this data could have been easily available through a dashboard. Sage Intacct Planning is easy to use. Whether your stakeholders have a strong financial background or not, they can participate and be responsible for how they run their budgets. These features will truly take the accountant role and elevate it to a more proactive approach to financial planning and analysis. You're no longer working on your budget only during budget season. With Sage Intacct Planning, you can devote a few hours a month and be ready to make changes quickly and easily. Okay. When we think about what sets Sage Intacct Planning apart from other planning software, we lead with these 4 items: self-discoverable, connected, powerful, and collaborative. What we mean by this self-discoverable, is the ease of setup and use. Typical planning and budgeting users want a tool that is easy to deploy. The intuitive and user-friendly tools are designed to be fully managed by the finance end user with no need for IT or admins to ever get involved. The connected item speaks to the user-friendly planning wizard, which provides an intelligent mapping and syncs with your Sage Intacct core. If your organization does not have a dedicated financial planning and analysis resource, these functions are being carried out by the controller and finance managers. With this bi-directional integration between SIP and Sage Intacct Core Financial means that you can make a change to a scenario in Sage Intacct Planning and quickly and easily merge that new scenario back into Sage Intacct Core. The powerful driver-based modeling, what-if scenarios, and rolling forecasts let you see the impact of your decisions immediately. Imagine being in a budget meeting and being able to update and create what-if scenarios on the fly. Think about how quickly any decision can be made if that data that supports your assumptions is updated in real time, where everyone can see the results immediately. The collaborative nature of the tool allows you to engage with the right people, the right data, at the right time. And I like to add a 5th item to this to mention its affordability. You get world-class planning functionality software that is priced 50% lower than most competitors. If you think about how much time is spent on budgeting and planning, this will pay for itself. Not having to be concerned with errors that are inherent with Excel, for example, or being approached by your CEO about making a small change in assumptions revolutionizes the financial planning and analysis process. When we think about the connection between SIP, or in this case, Sage Intacct Planning, and Sage Intacct, we have what we call the bidirectional integration, meaning information flows either from SIP into Sage Intacct or from Sage Intacct into SIP. It's important to note that the integration is initiated through SIP in either case. I'll show you how that works when we get into the demo. Imagine, if you will, creating a budget from scratch, where we use the data from a given period that is in your Sage Intacct Core, take that data and make changes to it, share it with other key stakeholders, and quickly and easily have a budget. As you can see on the slide, whatever information that is in your core financial general ledger, you'll have the opportunity to enter budgets on those dimensions. Keep in mind that if there are accounts or dimensions that are in Sage Intacct that are not in your planning, you will automatically be prompted during the import process to map these new items. The export function works similarly to the import. You'll see that one can create a new budget with all the accounts and dimensions mapped correctly. You also have the option of mapping any new dimensions that don't exist in Intacct. For example, if you want a budget line item that does not exist, just like in the import function, you'll automatically be prompted to map those during the export process. Okay. When we think about what sets this planning tool, let's stand out. The crucial element here is the financial planning and analysis. When I was a CFO and using Excel to manage my budgets, we typically spent 2 to 3 months on creating a budget for the following fiscal year. And once that budget was approved, we spent the remainder of the year looking at the budget to actual and for analysis purposes. With this added FP&A element, we're providing the finance team with tools that can help with strategic planning, forecasting, and analysis. It serves as a link between the organization's overall strategy, its financial resources, and its operational execution. Okay? The financial planning and analysis tool provides visibility by helping your organization understand critical financial issues and opportunities. It helps you respond to market and organizational changes, influence and inform the senior leaders, board members, department heads by giving them a better understanding of how financing and resources are being utilized. It will allow you to drive change throughout the organization. Okay? Sage Intacct Planning is the complete planning solution for your organization's success. I'm not going to go line by line on this slide. I wanted to include it just to give you a summary of the benefits. And as you can see here, I believe the benefits that stand out to me are the advanced modeling, what-if scenario modeling, and then the rolling forecasts, all of which I will go through in the demo. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and just stop this right here and just go into my Sage Intacct Planning. And I'll show you all of this item that I've just recently talked about. So I am right now logged into Sage Intacct Planning, and I want to just go over a couple of things here on the top where I can see here I've got an option to select the budgets that I want to work with, and you can work with as many budgets as you wish. You can toggle between the ones that you want to work in, and you can have as many of these as you wish. So keep that in mind. I like that feature because it makes me feel like it's in an Excel document where, again, if you make some changes or if you don't like something, you can go ahead and delete it and start all over, because creating that first budget is so simple. Again, once you're connected into Sage Intacct Core, the process of creating that first budget really only takes a few minutes, okay? And so all the dimensions and all the chart of accounts, all that information that exists in Sage Intacct Core will be part of your planning software, or a planning budget, I should say, ready for you to work, okay? And it's as simple as just clicking on this new budget, and there'll be a wizard that guides you through either taking data from Sage Intacct or uploading an existing Sage Intacct file, or if you need to, if it has it in Excel, you can also utilize it and import through Excel. Okay, so and then from up here, I just want to show you a couple other things here. That from here, I can also share the budget. This is that connected feature that I talked about the 4 pillars, if you will. How easy it is to get data back and forth. I can simply click on this, and I'll have an opportunity to log in. And once I do that, I have an opportunity to either import actuals from Sage Intacct, or I can export my budget back into Sage Intacct, or in this case, this new feature of importing statistical data from Sage Intacct. Okay, so you've got these opportunities to do these on a monthly basis. As you're working on the budget and you're creating your forecasts, you can constantly create a new forecast by bringing in actual data from Sage Intacct at any given point, okay? While I'm up here, I just want to continue with this menu here. There's also a help menu that you can access. There's also the sharing capability. And this is something that I love. And I mentioned it because of, again, one of the items or the pillars that I talked about was the collaborative nature. And I think this is really important because you can easily share the whole budget by simply typing in someone's email address here, and then you can give them an opportunity to either view or modified. And then once that's selected, you also have an advanced feature here that allows you to exclude certain line items. So if you want to share all of this budget, but you don't want to share certain things like maybe salary information, you can simply just choose to exclude that line for the sale. You can say that I don't want the salary and wages for their salespeople. By simply clicking that and choosing the other items that you don't want people to see, you can choose that you have that opportunity to do so. Okay, and plus there's additional items here that you can choose to select or deselect. Okay, I also want to mention there's a couple of things here. While you're going through this software, you're always going to see these little information icons, and by just hovering over them, that'll give you an opportunity to view information about that particular functionality. So you'll see that. It'll help you get through the, anytime you have any questions, it's always good to look at these, and you might have the answer already. Okay. All right, I'm going to get out of this. And I also just want to show you another part in the sharing perspective. When I just did this, you can share the whole budget, but I also just want to show you that, notice in this particular budget, I'm going to collapse it. And in this particular budget, I have it set up where I have 3 different organizations or locations, if you will. And just like we just shared the overall budget, I can potentially just share just this particular location by simply clicking on these 3 little buttons and choose the share option. And now I will get that same screen that we just saw a few moments ago, except notice here it's sharing just the SBC East, which is just that particular location that I have limited. And then again, even still, you can still exclude things like salaries and things like that from this perspective. Okay. So very good in terms of that collaboration. Again, I come from that world, and when I used to work in that field, sharing Excel files was always a nightmare, and also trying to exclude information so that I didn't confuse people always made it so much more difficult. And then always having to bring it back into one particular document. It was a big headache, and I feel like this would have definitely saved me a big headache, being that all the information is all in one place. Okay. All right. So now I want to just show you, just going back to dashboards, and up here there's a few menus that we have up here, and again this is pretty you can figure this out if you have a couple of minutes to poke around in there on your particular budget. Whereas in terms of the items that are available, even as a person who is just reviewing this, let me be a department head, but we have opportunities to look at the dashboards. And then throughout the system, you'll see information up here where we could filter things. And again, these are the locations or the departments. This all came over from Sage Intacct Core. So whatever dimensions you're utilizing in Sage Intacct, they will be available here for you to filter out. So if I want to filter out a specific department, I can go ahead and do so. Same thing with a location. If I want to do a specific location, I can go ahead and do that. I can also create additional dashboards by simply clicking on this add dashboard, and then I can add the widgets to this particular dashboard by just clicking on this add widgets, where I've got an opportunity to add some predefined graphs and information that might be important to the user. Okay, so very easy to do in terms of being able to see these dashboards, see this information. The next thing is really looking at the sheets area, and we're going to go back to this in a moment. But this is a way for us to see the information, sort of like in a financial statement perspective, where on the left-hand side, I can see the information. I can expand how I want to see the information, and you can see as I keep on clicking, it expands my budget, and I can see my line items. And notice that I'm still in this general admin, but I can actually just do all departments and all locations, and have the opportunity to see that from this perspective. Okay. All right. And all right. Okay. And the other thing here is to be able to see it, which I'll show you in a moment. But you can also, in terms of these filters, we can also see things like budget versus actuals. So now I can see the sheets. Again, we're in the sheets area where you can see the available reports here. There's a cash report, a P&L, balance sheet, bookings, headcount, and then models, which we'll talk about in a moment. But I can also see this from a actuals standpoint, where I have a column for my actuals, a column for my working, and then a column for my variances. Okay, so a lot of this information is driven by these filters that we're looking at here, which will give me the opportunity to see it any way that I wish. Okay. All right, the next thing I want to show you, and this is basically a day in the life of the accountant who's going to be doing this budget. And so in the inputs area, this is where I think I would say the magic happens, if you will. Again, starting a budget from scratch is very easy to do, whether you use the Excel import, if you have your budgets in Excel, or if you're using Sage Intacct Core, we can bring in last year's numbers and then estimates and things like that. But the idea is that once it's in here, you're able to see it, you're able to begin working on it. And I can either see it from here on this left-hand side where I can see the tree, the budget tree, and I can expand each item. And each time I expand, if I click on one of the items, I'll see this landing page that really dictates what that number is. And there's some information here, which we'll go over in a moment. Okay, I'm still going to continue on the operational expenses. You can see here that this one particular budget is broken down by department. So I can see my departments. And then once I expand those departments, I can see the individual budget line items. Okay. And I just want to show you here, if I look at one of these budget line items, just to show you that how this works is, notice up here, this is the account number that's associated with Sage Intacct Core. And then we've got this opportunity to look at what the type of budget it is. So in this case, it's going to be an expense. And we'll go over a couple of these in a moment. But the idea here is that I can fill in this information. This is a monthly budget number. And I can choose to do the monthly, quarterly, or if it's one time a year, or annually, all that information's here. I can also choose to spread it if it's the same amount each month or it's different, or if there's a growth percentage, you can choose that as well. In this case, all I've done is just chosen one where we put the amounts in, but you can see here, I can just choose the amounts and fill them in, and notice that it's filling in as I'm typing it in. Okay, so very easy to do to update your budget. You can also see what this year's budget versus past data. So I can click on that, and now I can see what the last year's numbers were. In this case, this particular number, they didn't have anything, so I've seen 0. But you can see how that works. If you wanted to see last year's numbers to come up with these numbers, you can do that. Okay. As I keep scrolling down, you've got an opportunity for the date range. You're not limited to creating a budget just for a fiscal year. You can go beyond a fiscal year. All of that information is here, available for you to do. As I keep scrolling down, you have the opportunity for dimensions, where you can allocate some of these expenses by simply clicking on this little button here, where I can potentially choose to allocate by certain percentages, and by whether it's location or department or customer. Again, depending on how I want this, what my dimensions are in Sage Intacct, I could potentially have the opportunity to do that. Okay, here, this is where the percentage were. Okay, so I can say 50% here and 50% here, and then choose the actual percentage share by each department. Okay. All right, if it's a depreciation expense, I can simply click on this, and it'll give me an opportunity to do the depreciation over the amount of years that I need, depending on the asset type, start date, and then and it's set. It's really one of those things, you set it and you forget it. This advanced function feature, this allows you to, for your cash recognition purposes or cash flow, I can simply click on this, and now I'll have an opportunity to add the percentages at which month I'm expect to pay these expenses, or if we're talking about revenues, when I'm expecting these revenues. And this information here that we're looking at, this will dictate your cash flow. So if you're asking about cash flow, this is how it's going to work. This is what's going to happen. You're going to be able to say when these items are based on these percentages, so that you can come up with a proper cash flow statement for budgeting purposes, to make sure you have enough cash to meet payroll, or just cash for investments, anything like that. You'll have that opportunity to review those kinds of statements. Okay, and then down here we have the comments. And this is a threaded comment, and you can simply click on these to create the comments that you wish. And what I love about this, again, is that when you're sharing this budget with people, whether it's the overall budget or people's specific budget, you do have the opportunity to see the threaded comments that are available. That, in other words, the justifications for people's line items. Okay. All right, and so now the other thing I want to show you is I mentioned here when I went up here, where is it? That the budget type expense. I want to show you something else because there's some really cool stuff in there. If I go ahead and choose, let's say, legal and accounting, this one in particular right now, it's we have an amount in here based on last year's numbers, and it has it gave me the opportunity to round it. Okay, but what I want to show you here is that under this expense type, there are some really cool expense types that we have here. And so a simple expense is just that, a simple expense. But then we've got some things here that I want to show you. Like, for example, there's a per employee expense or per new employee expense. So think of a per new employee expense thinking as, when you're looking to hire someone, there's always going to be some expenses that might be, affiliated or with that new employee, whether it's a new laptop or equipment for home office, anything like that. And so what happens is you can create this particular line item, and then anytime you have a new employee, it'll trigger this expense, so that, again, it's one of those things where you don't have to think about it. And so again, remember that day in the life of the budget manager. If you have all these things set up, think about how much easier your budget gets built every year, or even just monitored, because as you're growing, as you get new employees, as you maybe add new employees, this could be one of those things that gets updated automatically. Same thing with the next one I'm going to show you, which is a derived expense. And I love this, and I chose legal and accounting. And the idea here is that, okay, well, we have this legal and accounting expense, or maybe it could be some sort of like consulting expense. And the idea might be that, well, it's driven by our revenues, and it's a certain percentage of revenues. And so the amount of revenues dictates how much that is. And so I could potentially have this legal item here, and then where it says calculate using, I can say I just want to use revenues, and then tell it, okay, well, then say that it's going to be 2% of the revenues. And see, now I was able to come up with a budget line item based on that revenues data. And if that revenue data changes, this legal and expense accounting expense changes as well. Okay, so again, it's one of those things where I feel a day in the life of the budgeting person who has to worry about all these things. When you set them up in advance, they're there for you, and they're calculating, and you're always sure that your budget is going to be calculated correctly, and you're including all the stuff that you are supposed to include. So the risk of errors from an Excel standpoint are gone, and there's also reduces some of that risk that you forget certain items because they're based on other things like consulting expense, or like in this, legal expense, or things like that. So again, it's one of those things that really makes your life a lot easier. Okay, all right, I'm going to just save this. And the next thing I wanted to show you is just from a salary expenses. We can also have all of your employees listed here in the Sage Intacct Planning. And again, these employees aren't going to be necessarily on your general ledger, but you'll want to see the information on your planning or in this budgeting tool, where we can see the information about what role they're in, their base salary, their taxes, their benefits. All of those things are opportunities for you to tag that information to come up with these calculations. We also have an opportunity to do advanced benefits, where I'm going to just come back here and just show you where, let me see, hang on, details. I wanted to show you a couple of things here from a benefits perspective. I can see the detail. Here are the total benefits. This is the benefits, this is the taxes, and then there was a bonus. There's also a sign-on bonus. All of these things are things that you can put in while you create these employees, and then have that calculated automatically, and roll up to the budget. Okay, so that's very easy to do from your employee perspective. I also just want to mention that while we can make all these changes here, that you can see these here, and there's all these functions, which we'll talk about in a minute, but there's also an opportunity to do this via a table format. So if you like that Excel spreadsheet kind of feeling, you can have all your employees in one area here, and you can add employees and make changes to it very easily. Okay. Same thing with, if I go back to the main here, Again, we're looking at each line item from this perspective, but you can also do this up here, this grid entry. Click on this and you're able to see this in a grid entry format, where if you want to make changes to it, you can simply come in here and just click on and make your changes, or you can just click on it and what'll happen is this another screen will pop up where it'll allow you to make some changes. Okay, so very easy to do, to manipulate the data. And once you have it in here, it's again, just start typing in. You can type in the data and, typing the wrong thing here, but yeah, just type them in and you'll have the opportunity to see that here. Okay, all right. So up until now, what I wanted to say is I've shown you the basics of this Sage Intacct Planning, and I think that, you know, I always like to show the ease of it in this kind of format, if you will. But there are so many more things that you can do. You know, I didn't spend a lot of time talking about those other items that are those budget types here. There's a whole bunch of other budget types that really, again, are there to make your life easier. The one that we'll talk about now is going to be modeling. Okay, so again, from a financial industries, financial services industries, we have this opportunities to create these models. And I'm going to just switch my budget here. So I created a budget, a model under another budget here. And again, so now what we can do here is you have the opportunity to say, let's say you want to look at a loan portfolio. So you can see this here. There are this opportunity to create these models where you can add the assumptions, whatever the assumptions are. In this case, I'm doing a loan portfolio, interest rates, repayment terms, and all of that, all the items that are relevant to those types of calculations. And then in the model lines, I can go ahead and use these model lines to create the data that I need, you know, in terms of percentages, what's my expected default loss, my net revenue, variable costs, you know, operating expenses, net income, like all of these things are things that you can calculate. And then what's nice about having this model area is that when you do have a particular line item, you can always then have that item be tagged or connected, if you will, back into the budget line item. So if I look at a loan mix model, if I want to see what, you know, what happens if I change some of the different types of loans, whether I have business loans or auto loans, again, putting in your risk, all of the things that are related to the items as part of your calculations, you can use this model area to create those calculations as well. Same thing with, you know, let's say loan interest calculations. Once you create these calculations, you can then, you know, here, let's just say here on this one model line, I can actually click here, and what it will do is down here, well, I'll show you first the calculations that you can do. So just like if you're doing these calculations in Excel, this will work. You can see you can do if formulas, and you can create these models where you can multiply those assumptions by other assumptions and models and get the data that you need. But what I want to show you here is that once this is an item, you can add it to the budget by simply clicking here and mapping it to the line item that is appropriate for that particular budget. So again, now what that allows you to do is, I'm going to close and not save, is that if you have these items that are particularly connected to a particular budget line, and you decide that, okay, well, you know what, I want to make some changes. You know, the annual interest rate isn't really 8%. It's going to be, you know, some other percentage. Maybe it's, you know, 9%. And as soon as you do that, all of the items that are based on this calculation will also change. And so this brings me to this other part that, again, that sets this apart from using Excel or any other planning tool, is that you have the capability of creating scenarios. And by simply creating a scenario, so I can just say new scenario, and, you know, we'll just call this, well, I'm going to say loan mix. Let's just say that when it changed the loan mix. And now what it's done is I have an opportunity. It's created a complete copy of the actual working budget that I was just working on. And now it puts it into this other area here. And now if I want, now I can go ahead and just go ahead and make my changes in here. And you know, let's say if I'm planning to do, or I'm hoping that I'm going to do 25 loans. and maybe 30 of these loans. So what's that going to look like? And so by just changing these two variables, you can now, and if I hit save, and then go back to my sheets area, you'd be able to see now those changes where I can say my loan mix versus my budget. And then, so you can see your scenario, your budget, and then any variances that made that, that change, that caused that change, whether or not I changed the amounts or whatever in this case, you'd be able to see that overall change in the budget versus your actual, okay? And I do also want to mention this, just I didn't say it earlier, but you can, once you do connect this with Sage Intacct, I've got Sage Intacct open up here, and I just want to show you that once it's in here and you go through that process of bringing it in here, all you have to do is, if you simply go into the budgets area and then go to budget repository, I can simply click in here and I can see all of my budgets, whether it's the forecast, best case scenario, worst case scenario. I can see all of my budgets that I created in Sage Intacct Planning, and once they're in here, I can then go into my dashboards and analysis and planning, and whether it's in my reporting or anything like that, and I'm just looking at a simple report that I have in my dashboard in Sage Intacct, I can simply click on a particular item, and it'll take me give me an opportunity to drill down into that particular item, and then simply click on it. And if I still need more information, it will open up. Notice it's opening up another tab here up on top, and it'll take me back to the budget to explain where that number came from. So again, there's that integration between Sage Intacct Planning and Sage Intacct Core that's seamless, that you can have just another tab open up on top to work on either the budgeting or in Sage Intacct. Either way, they're connected from that perspective. Again, once you have that data, it's easy enough to bring back and forth from Sage Intacct Planning back and forth. So if you want to do some forecasting, you can do that as well. I'll show you here. Let me go back to my other budget here. Hang on one second. Let me go back. Okay. And just going back to my original budget that I was working in. And so here, once you're back in here, you can also click on this history button where it'll allow me to create a version or a snapshot, or in this case, maybe a forecast for a particular month. So I can say forecast, if I can spell forecast for, we'll say May. I don't already do one for May, and then instead of a snapshot, I want a forecast, and then I can add it, and then now that's going to be added as part of my historical or backup, if you will. And so I can always go back to an earlier version. You can see all of these, and by simply clicking on this this little arrow which says switch to that version, which will bring me back to that version to see the changes or the forecast that I'm looking to review. Okay, so again, from that integration standpoint, you can have as many of these budgets in Sage Intacct Core as you wish. So if you have multiple budgets throughout the year, this will be something that you can have multiple columns, right? You can have a financial statement that has your approved budget, and then you might have another one that has a modified budget throughout the year as you're making changes to your budgets, as you're responding to organizational or market changes. As I mentioned earlier, you'll be able to do that and also save that information and be able to review it in a way that makes sense for your organization. Okay. All right. So now, so again, think about if you've ever had to do this in the past using Excel, you would have had so many different versions of your budget. I still laugh when I think about how I used to have to compile all the different worksheets in Excel. Then I had to name them, operating budget final, version 2, revision 6. That was a nightmare. This is a great benefit of having it all in one source of truth. All these things are here for everyone to see. And, I just want to reiterate that, it's Sage Intacct Planning. It's a no-brainer. The real-time collaboration with key stakeholders, giving them the opportunity to take responsibility for how they spend on their budgets and just monitor them increases the trust. It provides greater agility to respond to business and market changes. And again, it's something that, as my 12-year-old niece would say, it's groundbreaking. So I encourage you to kind of ask more questions. Again, this was supposed to be a high-level demo, and I hope that I've enticed you enough to be more curious about it. I will just kind of put this back on here where if you haven't gotten started with Sage Intacct Planning, please contact your partner or channel executive, and they will, reach out to me, whoever. If you have any questions, if you need to get started on training, please, contact your partner or your channel executive, and then from there, we will get you to where you need to be. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you.